I'm not a lawyer, but let's get into day 8 of the Karen Read trial. So the next witness is Chris Albert. He's the third oldest in the Albert family, which means yes, Brian Albert is his brother. Chris Albert was John's neighbor, and he also owned a pizza shop that John would come by and eat at occasionally with his nephew.
So he bought the One Meadows Ave, the top house, 2017, so he became my neighbor. But he would also come to my pizza shop a lot.
January 28th, 2022. Do you recall that day?
John came in that day with his nephew, Patrick. I think they just got 2 slices of pizza. So he asked me if I had any plans that night, and I said, unfortunately, it's Friday, and I'm working pretty much till close. And I said, but it's my nephew's birthday, and I know a bunch of people are heading out, and I was planning on meeting up with them later when I got out of work. I said to him, I'll shoot you a text later if you're around. Maybe we can hook up. So the shop stays open until 10. I think my wife said, are you coming down? Are you there? She was down there, so I had a conversation with her. I think that's how I headed down there. So John O'Keefe came with Karen Read. Well, when they came over, I think they started talking. At one point, when they first came over, the defendant came in with a glass underneath her jacket. And I thought that was kind of funny, and I laughed about it and made a comment about it. It was just a tall, like, cylinder glass with some clear liquid in it and a lime. It was fine. Everyone was just having a good time. Someone mentioned going back to my brother's house, 34 Fairview.
As things begin to wind down and people are figuring out where they're going to go next, Chris decides that he's just going to go home. He walks, while everyone else prepares to head to Brian and Nicole's house, which again is 34 Fairview Road.
So my wife left first, obviously. She didn't feel well. She left earlier. Brian and Brian left. My sister-in-law left. Matt and Jen left. I left probably second to last. I probably left last with John and Karen, or right around the time that John and Karen left. Just started snowing. It was cold out, and it just started snowing. The ground had like a light coat.
And about what time was it that you got home?
Sometime between, I'd say 5 past and 10 past 12, somewhere in that window. No, I ran right upstairs. I was freezing. I went right into my room.
Mr. Albert, as far as your son, Colin, do you know sort of where he was that night?
So he was at my brother Brian's house for my nephew's birthday.
And how do you know?
Because he opened the bedroom door and said, "Good night, guys. I love you. I'm home."
About how long after you got home was it that your son got home?
I'd say within 10 minutes. Shortly after I woke up, my wife entered the room, but that was a little bit later. I don't know exactly what time. She informed me that something had happened to John. Basically, that John had died. That he was found somewhere on the front lawn of 34 Fairview. I was in shock. I was like, "What are you talking about? Like, what do you mean?" And then I jumped up, and she's like, we have to go over. Let's go over to your brother's house." I don't remember exactly what time we went over there. Maybe 9 or 9:30. From what I remember, I was there. My wife was there. My brother Brian, Nicole, Brian Higgins was there. Matt McCabe was there, and Jen McCabe was there.
And now some cross.
Currently own D&E Pizza in Canton?
Correct.
And you also are a town selectman in the city of Canton?
Recently elected.
Your brother Brian Albert, with whom you grew up, is currently retired, but had been a Boston police officer who lived in Canton, correct?
Correct.
You would agree with me that Brian Albert only moved from Canton after John O'Keefe was found dead on his front lawn, correct?
Can you rephrase that?
I'll phrase it the exact same way and ask for a yes or no if you can do that. You would agree with me that your brother Brian Albert only moved from Canton after John O'Keefe was found dead on his front lawn?
Yeah, I just don't understand the phrase, but he moved shortly after that, yes.
Now, you know that Massachusetts State Police Trooper Michael Proctor is the lead investigator on this case, correct?
I know that.
One of your wife's best friends is Michael Proctor's sister, Courtney Proctor, correct?
Objection.
You know Courtney Proctor, correct?
Yes,
And you know her to be Michael Proctor's sister, correct?
that's correct.
Who is Kenneth Berkowitz?
The former Canton police chief. His son and my son are the same age, so they played on some sports teams when they were younger together. I think that's when I first came to know. I became friendly with him, sure.
So, Mr. Albert, that's obviously you on the right and Kenny Berkowitz on the left?
Correct. I believe that's my fundraiser for when I was running for the select board.
Part of your duties as a town selectman is to oversee the Canton Police Department, correct?
I'm recently elected, so I'm just going through it. But yeah, I believe so.
We've established that Lieutenant Lank has been a friend of yours for years.
Yes?
We've established that you know former police chief Kenneth Berkowitz.
I know Kenny, yep.
You also knew Michael Proctor prior to January 29th of 2022, correct?
Correct.
Michael Proctor came to question you, did he not?
Along with another trooper, correct.
Do you consider the Proctors to be the Albert's second family?
No.
You are aware that there are members of the Proctors family who have posted publicly that the Alberts are their second family, correct?
So the objection is sustained, and I'm striking that question.
I just have one more area that I want to cover with you, sir. Testified on direct examination, thought you got home between 12:05 and 12:10 a.m. on January 29th.
That's what I remember.
If I suggested to you that you didn't even leave the bar until 12:13 a.m., would you quarrel with that?
No, I guess not. I mean, I believe it's me.
Having now viewed that video with the timestamp of 12:13 and about 43 seconds or so, does that refresh your memory as to when you left the waterfall?
Yes.
That would mean it would have been impossible for you to get home to Maple Street by 12:05 or 12:10, correct?
Correct.
Came home, and I think we agreed it was around 12:20 or so, give or take a minute.
Roughly. I started to doze off. I don't know exactly how soon after I fell asleep. I would say more like within 15 minutes.
Now, when you came home, you would agree with me that your son, Colin Albert, was not home, correct?
Not when I first got home.
I think your testimony was 10 minutes after you got home, he opened the bedroom door.
I think that's what I said, yeah.
Do you want to stick with that?
I'm just trying to recollect what I, thinking it over, so obviously it was a little bit longer.
Because you actually woke up when he opened the bedroom door, correct?
I don't think so.
Did you not just testify before this jury you fell asleep and that your son, Colin, opened the bedroom door and woke you up to say goodnight?
Yeah, I guess that's what I said.
So in terms of the timing of this, then sometime after you're asleep, after 12:35, that's when Colin opens the bedroom door, correct?
I don't remember exactly.
Well, it's difficult for you to remember how long you'd been asleep for when Colin opened the bedroom door, correct?
Correct.
You don't know if it was 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or longer.
I don't know exactly.
You previously confirmed that when you walked in your door on January 29th of 2022 after coming home from the waterfall, your son Colin was not home, correct?
It's correct.
At that time, you had no personal knowledge of where he had been that night, correct?
That's correct.
Since that time, you know that he was at your brother Brian's house that night, Brian Albert.
It's correct.
And you knew that address to be 34 Fairview Road.
Correct.
And you knew that that was the same house outside which John O'Keefe was found dead later that morning, correct?
Correct.
When you spoke to Trooper Proctor on February 10th of 2022, you would agree with me that you never mentioned that Colin Albert was at your brother Brian's house that night, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
I don't remember.
The next witness up is Julie Albert. She is Chris Albert's wife, the witness we just saw. And even though she went to the waterfall that night, she didn't stay long because she had a headache. And when she's on the stand, she also talks about remembering how Karen Reed walked into the waterfall bar that night with a clear glass.
She opened her jacket and had a glass and pulled the glass out and started drinking the drink. I think I laughed and made a comment like, "You're crazy," or something, just because she walked in with the glass. I left very shortly after. I had a terrible migraine. My middle son was not home. He was at, I believe, my brother and sister-in-law's, Nicole and Brian Albert's house on Fairview Road.
Who came home first, your husband Christopher or your son?
My husband. I want to say about after 12, maybe 12:10, sometime around 12:10, yes. He came upstairs to my room. He was shivering, went to the bathroom, got undressed, and got into bed.
How long was it after your husband came home that your son Colin?
10 to 15 minutes. Yes, we talked for a minute. He asked me if I was feeling better. We talked for a moment.
Turning your attention to the next morning.
I woke up about 8-ish. I had a missed call from my friend Jen McCabe. 5:55 maybe?
So you didn't call her back or anything like that?
I did not.
And with regard to your nephew, Brian Jr., whose birthday it was now on the 29th. What, if any, sort of tradition do you have with respect to him and his birthday?
Every year on his birthday, I go to Dunkin' Donuts. I get him 6 donuts, and I bring them to the house, and I leave them there with a card.
At some point, you go to Dunkin' Donuts and get the 6 donuts?
Yes, I drove to 34 Fairview. Jennifer McCabe's car was in the driveway. I opened my car door. I got out to walk to the car in front of me to leave the donuts and card inside my nephew Brian's car. Brian Albert Sr. came to the door, and he told me to come in, asked me to come in for a second. And I said that I didn't need to, and he said, no, just come in for a second. So I went into the house. Everyone was just sitting there, and I was looking around, and everyone was visibly upset. And I asked, what's going on? And another maybe 30 seconds went by, and Jen said, something's happened to John. I woke up my husband, told him what had happened, and we went back to Fairview.
And now some cross.
Michael Proctor was the brother of one of your close friends, correct?
Correct.
You're close friends with Courtney Proctor, correct?
I am.
And you have a sister, Jill Daniels, correct?
Yes, I do.
And you would agree that Jill Daniels is also lifelong best friends with Courtney Proctor, correct?
Yes, she is.
Have you ever provided child care for Courtney Proctor's children?
2019. And then when COVID happened and everything shut down, I wasn't helping her any longer. Occasionally after, I would help just on an as-needed basis.
Do you deny that you were very close with Courtney Proctor?
No,
You also talk by phone.
very rarely.
Did you say very rarely you talk
Phone,
to Courtney Proctor by phone?
usually it's text.
Were you using Courtney Proctor as an intermediary to communicate with Michael Proctor about this case?
No, I was not.
Are you aware that between February 1st of 2022 and September 6th of 2022, you and Courtney Proctor spoke by phone 67 times?
No, I don't know the exact count.
Do you still want to maintain your testimony that you only talked very rarely with Courtney Proctor during that time period?
I just don't remember the exact amount of times.
It's the third line down.
Third line down.
Did you speak to Courtney Proctor that day in any fashion?
What day exactly?
The day of my client's arrest on February 1st of 2022.
Well, I did, obviously, if it was on that sheet.
What did you discuss?
I don't recall.
The next day, February 2nd of 2022, was the day that my client was arraigned back in Stoughton District Court. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
You spoke to Courtney Proctor 3 times that day before my client's publicly televised arraignment at 9 a.m. Did you not?
Again, I don't remember.
After the arraignment, you spoke to her again for 27 minutes, beginning at 10:58 a.m. Did you not?
I don't recall.
Did the subject of Karen Reed's arraignment come up in any of those 3 calls on February 2nd, the day she was going to be arraigned, before her arraignment?
I don't remember exactly. I do not remember. I don't remember what I was talking about. It could have been about the kids. It could have been about anything. I don't remember.
As of the date of these phone calls that we've discussed so far, the February 1st and the February 2nd, multiple phone calls, Trooper Proctor still had not interviewed you, correct?
Correct.
You were finally interviewed by Trooper Proctor on February 10th, about 13 days after John O'Keefe was found dead on Brian Albert's lawn, correct?
Correct.
You and your husband were interviewed together, correct?
Correct.
Then at 6:17 p.m. that same night, shortly after you had been interviewed, you called Michael Proctor's personal cell phone number, correct?
I don't remember.
Then he gets back to the night at the waterfall.
And you left the waterfall at around 11 o'clock, your best memory?
A little after 11.
When you got home, your son Colin was not there, correct?
Correct.
Now, at some point, your husband Chris came home, correct?
Yes.
You testified on direct examination that Chris came home at 12:10 a.m. on January 29th.
That's what time I believe he did, yes.
That 12:10 a.m. time, did you discuss that precise time with anybody prior to taking the stand yesterday?
No.
Was that coordinated with anybody such that your husband and you gave the same time of 12:10 a.m.?
No.
Stop. Do you recognize that person?
Yes, I believe it's my husband.
Would you agree with me that your husband left the waterfall at about 12:13 and 46 seconds?
Well, yes, I mean, that's what it says on the screen.
Okay. But in any case, let's leave it at 6 or 7 minutes. That puts him, your husband, coming home at around 12:20 or 12:21, correct?
Correct.
All right.
I think he got right into bed. I was just sitting up in bed praying for my headache to go away.
You would agree with me that your husband, Chris, was asleep when Colin came home, correct?
Correct.
Directing your attention to the next morning, you missed a phone call from your best friend, Jennifer McCabe, correct?
Correct.
And you believe that phone call, I think according to your memory, yesterday came in at, 5:55 a.m., correct?
Correct.
You were able to recall that time nearly 2 years later, correct?
Yes.
But regarding the 67 phone calls between you and Courtney Proctor that happened after that, you're not able to recall any of those, correct?
I just don't remember them.
And then similar to the ending of Chris Albert's testimony, Karen Reed's attorney asked Julie Albert if she told Trooper Proctor that her son, Colin Albert, was at 34 Fairview Road the night before John was found outside.
One last question. You were interviewed by Trooper Proctor, and it's fair to say you never told him that Colin was there that night, correct?
I don't recall my interview.
Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube page because we are talking about this case on my podcast, I'm Not a Lawyer, but The Debrief. The episodes are released every single Friday, so please go check it out. Also because I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep up with this trial and YSL, and there's another one I want to tell y'all about. So go watch the podcast, please.